So today I want to talk about something that will undoubtedly divide you guys, you lovely, lovely people. The reason I want to discuss it though is because I want to try and see if I can get one video monetized. This video should qualify, but as YouTube is somewhat fickle, I am forced to do this through a premiere. Premiere? Yes. I do apologise, my hand is forced. Anyway, the subject is alimony. Something which I'm not entirely sure in the current modern world, so not all of the world, but the modern part, should exist, and I'd like to explain why. A general consensus that can be agreed upon is that alimony existed, or post-marital support, existed as a way to help the other person who would otherwise be incapable of continuing to live the life they had before. I know I've dumbed it down, and it's vastly more complicated and complex depending on individual circumstance, but please bear with me. The point being that when two people separated, if someone didn't have the work experience or any work experience and then was struggling to make ends meet, or was so used to living a certain type of life, they were entitled to a share of the earnings of the other person, now their ex, until they either married someone else or decided they didn't want it anymore. Many of us can agree this is hugely unfair and reeks of entitlement with what exists today, and what has existed for actually quite a number of years. It's called equality after all. Personally, I think when you divorce, the assets you both share are cut down the middle. If there are no children, there should definitely be no kind of financial support on the other person who is not as well off because they are no longer with you. Someone can now make the argument, but if the person who has all the money and makes all the money was the one that cheated in the first place, surely they should be the one to foot a rather hefty bill. No. And we're going to go into something very similar to that in a moment, I promise you that. When it comes to those couples though that have children, and let's ignore the circumstances surrounding the divorce for a moment, because I want to make a very clear point about those that have children and the separation. In the United Kingdom we have child support. Now it doesn't typically go to the parent who has the kids. It usually goes into the benefits that person receives, if at all any, from the taxpayers, i.e. through the benefits system. I know this from my own childhood. I thought it was utterly stupid, because my mother received no help whatsoever. She worked 4 jobs, no benefits. So where was the child support? Anyway, I do believe the responsibility of both parents is to look after those children and make sure that they can give them a quality of life. How that quality is determined, I am unsure, but it should be down the middle. It should not be one person propping up everyone else. So some kind of baseline depending on cost of living and number of children should be ascertained via a means-assessed method. As many of you will undoubtedly now be aware, I have to bring that up. I have to cross many different avenues and exhaust them and explain them if I can, because there is going to be somebody that says, herder, but what if? And the reason I'm bringing all of this up is because of an event that took place in North Carolina, where an ex-husband won a $750,000 lawsuit after deciding to pursue a legal claim against his wife's lover, now his ex-wife. According to court documents, Kevin Howard won the judgment for alienation of affections. This claim exists in only a few other states across the country. It's not universal. Alienation of affection laws, which most of you will call homewrecker laws, allows the spouse to sue another person for purposefully interfering with the marital relationship, which, because of how this went through the court system, he managed to prove. In this particular case, Kevin Howard proved that the new man in his ex-wife's life was essentially alienating her from Kevin Howard when they were still married. To prove this, before the divorce had even happened, which, by the way, 12 years of marriage? Yeah. When she had approached him about separating, he recommended marriage counselling, which they attended. But after noticing things were not going very well, he took the liberty of hiring a private investigator who found out about the affair. Instead of blaming his wife, he blamed the man. This being supported by the fact that the man was actually a friend of the family, a co-worker of hers who had had dinner with the family many times. Kevin Howard claims this isn't about money, and that it is entirely about the sanctity of marriage, something which he has shown no regard for. To sue the defendant, who is unnamed, Kevin Howard hired Cynthia Mills, who has argued at least 30 cases of alienation of affection. She indicated that it is quite prevalent. And to win this case in particular, she had to do something quite old-fashioned, dating back to Old English law where women were viewed as property. So in the same way that a man could sue for theft of horse, carriage, etc., he could sue for the theft of his wife. Because of the law in place, any spouse can sue regardless of their gender or their partner, with her also claiming that in many of the cases it's not about the money but the principle. And I do get the point. I don't really view someone as property, but I do get the overarching point. It's not something I can comfortably and wholeheartedly support, because the reasoning given by many people for why alienation of affection even exists in the first place is because of the failure of alimony, which I earlier mentioned. After doing a little digging, I noticed that it is seen as a way of trying to balance the alimony equation, when surely the best way to fix this would be to fix alimony, if at all in any kind of circumstance it's something that exists. North Carolina takes this very seriously, by the way, alienation of affection. Last August, a man paid out to the tune of $8.8 million for cheating with someone else's wife, which, while hilarious, I don't entirely agree with the entire story of that, because it doesn't just include alienation of affection, but it also includes intentional infliction of emotional distress, negligent infliction of emotional distress, assault, battery, and some of it actually goes down to damages, punitive and business related, because the company that the wife in that particular story worked for was also the husband's company. The wife left the company, so the company lost revenue. There is a greater context, so one can understand why the money is so high, but when you include all the supposed damages, I really don't want to include alienation of affection. The overarching point, I guess, which is actually what I started with, is I don't agree with most cases of alimony or money when it's given out after marriage, but I do understand and respect why some cases will exist to grant compensation depending on the circumstance where it should be awarded. If we remove children from the equation entirely and focus on the man and the wife, the husband, the wife and the wife, and so on. The two people in, 2 to 3, maybe more people in that relationship, whoever's in it. If somebody has been alienated and pulled away from those they claim to love, should the person who pulled that person away be made to pay for it? That is the most important part of this. Now, why I've connected this to alimony, I just wanted to complain about alimony, to be honest. The whole marriage system where things like that exist, I don't care for it. I also don't care for the idea of using something that goes back and bases it on someone in the marriage being considered property. But again, it is a handy piece of history to use to make a more modern point, which I can understand. And I hope you all do too. I do actually want to know what you think about this concept, whether you think it should exist in the first place. And also what you think of alimony, because the whole thing, where monetary gain is given, for whatever reason it exists, I'm very interested to know what you all think. As a final thing, I was having a conversation with Irate Alex when he asked me to make a little video for his channel, linked to the video below. He mentioned recently he had acquired a coat of arms after asking people to submit entries, and it got me thinking, why don't I have one? I kind of want one. So, if you are at all artistically inclined and would like to design a coat of arms for my channel, please hit me up on Twitter, my DMs are open, or email me at the email linked on the main channel About page and submit your entries. I'm not sure what I could offer in the way of a prize, but I'm sure we can discuss something. So I hope you'll have a lovely Monday, and thank you all for listening.